Hello YouTube audiences, if you've clicked on this video, you either know me personally, have clicked on this accidentally, have recently also been assigned to the Lighthouse in your English class, or you are my English R1B professor. In any case, I hope you'll join me over the course of these next 10 minutes as I use arguments from philosophical greats to attempt to shine a light on a new perspective from which to interpret this timeless literary classic, and maybe even offer an alternative perspective from which to view the sources of everyday pleasures in your life. Throughout this video, I encourage you to keep the following questions in the back of your mind. What are your sources of motivation? What brings you joy? Are you pursuing current paths or goals in life because they bring you a truly authentic pleasure, or because of an external, maybe familial or societal influence that has contorted away at your idea of joy? In this vein, we will see that the novel recurringly presents the theme of beauty and different characters' definitions of it. It is through this motif that we will make our dissection of the novel. So, without further ado, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf is a 20th century novel that depicts scenes from the lives of the Ramsays, a sizable, middle-class British nuclear family, as they interact with a cast of other characters from their summer home. The omniscient third-person point of view that the story is written in allows for the exploration of the characters' complex internal struggle. For instance, we witness as Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay struggle with the unrelenting passage of time in uniquely different ways. Moreover, Lily's response to this very same dilemma evolves throughout the novel, away from the views of either of the Ramsays. These different responses can be explained through Walter Pater's theory of aesthetic relativism. In his work, Studies in the History of the Renaissance, he argues against a universal formula for beauty. Mobilizing this theory, Woolf juxtaposes characters and their different ideas of what they consider to be beautiful in order to present what I've dubbed interested aestheticism as a more definitive way of defining beauty, or more precisely, to not define it. To begin, Mrs. Ramsay's reaction to the existential crisis that is the linear passage of time is a failed attempt at a disinterested perception of beauty. In his essay, Pater argues against previously defined notions of beauty that involve the dissociation of one's personal experience from judgment, a definition coined disinterested aestheticism by philosophers like Immanuel Kant. Instead of relying on an objective, abstract, universal formula, Pater believes that beauty is relative. When presented with the time-passing dilemma, Mrs. Ramsay embodies a personal definition of beauty based on a formula around familial life and marriage. For example, during the dinner party that the Ramsays put on, Mrs. Ramsay is uneasy, waiting for Paul and Mita to come in. And later, she gave one last look at the dinner party over her shoulder, already the past. To Mrs. Ramsay, something can only be beautiful if it satisfies her pseudo-objective 19th century influence definition of beauty. Moreover, Mrs. Ramsay is distraught by the thought of time causing her children to grow apart from her. Why must they grow up and lose it all, she says. Never will they be so happy again. However, while Mrs. Ramsay values such facets of life, this is not objectively what is universally important. Instead of some objective metric, Mrs. Ramsay's definition of beauty stems from her gender role conforming personality, which dictates valuing the role of mother and wife. Signs of this gender characteristics are seen throughout the novel. Another instance being Mrs. Ramsay pushing the social standards of marriage onto Lily because Mrs. Ramsay believed that an unmarried woman has missed the best of life. Pater argues that attempting to apply objective criteria, as Mrs. Ramsay has done, takes away from the ability to find pleasure in beauty. This argument has indeed taken form in the case of Mrs. Ramsay because, as illustrated throughout the aforementioned scenes, her warped idea of beauty has caused nothing but anxiety and sorrow for herself, as well as self-doubt and toxic pressure in others. Thus, by presenting the product of a distressed outlook on time, Woolf successfully showcases the superiority of Pater's pleasure-seeking philosophy on beauty. Similarly, Mrs. Ramsay's spouse, Mr. Ramsay, also conflates his personal definition of beauty with social influences. However, for him, it rests in his identity as a male and head of household. When Mr. Ramsay wrestles with the state of his accomplishments, he contemplates the following. And a man's fame lasts how long? It is permissible even for a dying hero to think before he dies how men will speak of him hereafter. His fame lasts perhaps 2,000 years? And what are 2,000 years? While he believes that his criteria for determining his social worth are based on objective measures, the importance of a legacy is subjective. Mr. Ramsay's desire for men not to speak of him ill suggests that his perception of time's passing lay root in the societal male expectation to be respected for intellect or accomplishments. This attempt of his at a disinterested perception is likewise problematic, as it can cause an elitist judgment toward others, and within Mr. Ramsay, it facilitated feelings of inadequacy, disabling his ability to view his current accomplishments in a positive light. Thus, Mr. Ramsay's view of time as a force that burdens him with having to protect his legacy establishes a disinterested perception, one based in harmful gender convention criteria, of what he deems valuable in life. Woolf is again demonstrating the toxicity of disinterested aestheticism. Finally, in contrast to the Ramsays, Lily's character illustrates having an alternative outlook on the nature of time. Through Lily's development, Woolf aims to promote an interested aestheticism point of view, that is, a view of the world that doesn't attempt to be unbiased, a feat which the Ramsays showcase is inherently impossible. Instead, Lily embraces a definition of beauty specific to an individual's delights. At the beginning of the novel, Lily does share similar biases to the Ramsays. Particularly, she worries about whether her art is good enough to withstand the test of time, an anxiety that only worsens after Mr. Tansley makes comments about women's abilities or inabilities to paint. This is yet again an example of the adverse effects of disinterested perception, as Lily doubts the quality of her painting when her painting doesn't satisfy the unreasonable criteria of being a painting by a man set about by the sexist standards of the time. However, as the story progresses, not only does Lily reject Mr. Ramsay's femininity adopting perspective, such as by asserting her independence from marriage, but by the end of the novel, she strays from the disinterested perspective entirely. This development is evident by Lily's thoughts as she places the final touches on her painting. Her paintings would be hung in the attics, she thought. It would be destroyed, but what did it matter? It was done. It was finished. Yes, she thought, laying down her brush in extreme fatigue. I have had my vision. Lily adopts a taste for beauty relying solely on her unique sensual pleasures. This realignment away from objective beauty and toward beauty based on individual taste allows Lily to finally finish her portrait as she allows herself to paint the bay that she thought was beautiful. Rather than cynically focusing on how her art will withstand the test of time, Lily finds pleasure in painting something she found beautiful at the moment. Woolf seems to intentionally present this change in perspective as growth, conveying the importance of prioritizing pleasure over conforming to standards. In conclusion, the theme of time passing that is interwoven throughout the story accentuates that a disinterested perspective leads to inherently cynical and problematic views of the world. On the other hand, Woolf conveys that allowing one's opinion of beauty to be relative to individual desires leads to fulfillment, as illustrated in the time passes section of the story by the casual or little attention that is paid to major revelations, such as the literal death of Mrs. Ramsay. Time is an unrelenting force, thus needs to be seized. In other words, To the Lighthouse is Woolf's modem to express an argument corroborating Pater's idea that to burden always with this hard, gem-like flame to maintain this ecstasy is success in life. It is precisely because of time's constant flux, its fleeting nature, and the instability of any one moment, that seeking out pleasures in the moment while we have it is vitally important. And with that, I'm gonna let this video run over 10 minutes.